Welcome to the Social Engineer podcast number 145, the Human Element series. I'm Chris Hadnagy, your founder of the podcast and the CEO of Social Engineer LLC, social-engineer.org, and the Innocent Lives Foundation. And I've been doing this, well, I used to say really forever, but our guest here makes me feel like I'm not as old as I feel. So since 2009.
So you're saying I look old? Is that
No,
what you're
no, not at all. I'm
young.
saying the way your stories, you started talking about all the things you were doing in the 80s and stuff. And I used to be like, look how long I've been doing this. But that was foot and mouth syndrome, folks, in case you're not familiar with that.
We should start this again.
Psychological. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave that because that's a great example of how even when you do communications for a living, you could still screw up all the time. So anyhow, let's hand this off to someone better. My co-host, the amazing Maxie Reynolds.
Well, Chris makes me feel young, and I have a diverse background in much, I am Maxie Reynolds. I am the technical team lead at Social Engineer and attacker mindset expert. I have a background in oil and gas. I'm trained in quantum computing, and I have done other stuff.
Modeling, stunt driving.
Stunt driving were the good old days. Some other stuff. What else?
I don't know. You're great at social engineering.
I am good at social
And you have a great sense of humor too, which I happen to like.
And I'm young.
And she's young compared to me. Compared to me, that is. Anyhow, this episode is sponsored by the one and only Social Engineer LLC. We are a premier organization focusing on the human element. I'm actually really excited about this year, 2021, because we are launching a whole bunch of new things, some new trainings, new services like phishing as a service, which you could check out. All of those things on social-engineer.com. Our trainings will be up there really shortly. We'll be at Black Hat. I just found out the APSE class will be there at Black Hat. So we're excited about that. So you can check us out at social-engineer.com. A couple other things as announcements. We know we have a Slack channel now. And that Slack channel is devoted to, I think, hundreds of people are in there at this moment talking about all things to do with social engineering, psychology, influence, persuasion, rapport. And we've had 5 people find jobs. So if you're in the field and you're looking for some employment, hit up the show notes. We'll have the Slack link in there. Yeah. Give a big shout out to Clutch. Check them out on pro-rock.com. Why? Because they're the best band on earth. That's it. That's all you need to know. Maxie, this is on video. I'm going to tell Neil Fallon. I'm going to tell Neil the GOAT Fallon that you just did. Anyhow, and also please check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. My team there is just unbelievable. We are 4 years old now, and we're focusing on helping law enforcement help uncover, track, and trap child predators. So we're just finished our 327th case, if you can believe that, 347th case, and we are actively working on many others. So check out innocentlivesfoundation.org if you want any more information on that. Now let's get to the good part. My much insulted guest, as I started off today, is Dr. Jack Schafer. Now you may say, wait, where do I know that name from? That's because the guy's written some books that you probably heard of or read. He's a retired FBI special agent who's currently employed as an associate professor at Western Illinois University. And while he was in the FBI, he was assigned to the FBI's National Security Behavioral Analysis Program, or what we're calling BAP, not the BAU, but the BAP. I could say that. I like that word. Jack has authored many books, but some of the ones you probably know, The Like Switch. We all know that. We've talked about that before on the podcast. And also The Truth Detector, an ex-FBI agent's guide for getting people to reveal the truth, which sounds like a pretty awesome book for our field. Jack, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show because you were recommended not only by Joe Navarro, but also by our great friend, Robin Dreek, who has nothing but great things to say about you.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Those guys really look up to you. And when that happens, we are very excited to have a guest on.
Yeah, I know both of them quite well.
And they've both done similar things, like where they retired from the FBI and now write books and help teach and train and bring that knowledge out to the current world to help us all be a little safer and better at what we do every day.
Yeah.
That's kind of great. How did you decide that? Like when you were in the FBI, and you started gaining all these skills. How did you then, when you retire, say, I'm going to go and start training? I'm going to start training people in this field.
Well, I initially, when I retired, I was recruited by a Beltway Bandit company that worked with the intelligence apparatus in the United States, and I was training them, and I was teaching them how to elicit information from people, become friends with people, and just using nonverbal language to do that, to make that communication. And one of the students in one of my classes, they were sitting there and they got there way early. And I go, like, what are you guys doing here so early? And they says, we can't wait for class to start. I said, well, that's odd. Why would we want to wait for class to start? Well, a friend of ours in the last class, he went to a bar and he said he could get a woman to come over and talk to him without saying a word. So they picked out a woman in the bar who was with a friend of hers. And he started using the nonverbals, the head tilt, the eyebrow flash, the smile, and mutual gaze, extended mutual gaze. And the woman, when her friend left, the woman came over and said, can I join you for a drink? And they said, we want to learn that stuff. That stuff we want to learn.
So you were running a college-sponsored dating class.
Yeah.
I know. Well, I told them the point of the class was not to pick up women. It was to learn how to operate intelligence operations.
Yeah. Well, that's like an intelligence operation.
Yeah,
you know,
one is far harder than the other.
Yeah.
And then I thought to myself, they're right. All the things that we learned as behavioral analysts to get spies to come out of the woodwork and talk to us out of the shadows, to get them to double back and work for us against their country, to betray their country, or to recruit them or interview them. All those skills are the same skills that we can use as humans to get along with one another. So I translated those skills that we learned in the behavioral analysis program to everybody that can use that to get people to like them, to be friends with them.
That brings up an interesting question, because oftentimes in movies and television shows, you see FBI agents getting people to comply through torture, waterboarding, electrocution, whatever. But here you used rapport, you used friend building to get people to do things that sound crazy. Like you said, betray their own country and work for the U.S. government. Yeah. How, not looking for all your trade secrets, but how did you do that? How strong is rapport that you can get someone to actually do that?
Rapport building is extremely important. There's several reasons why, because if I can get someone to like me, then they're going to want to do something for me because they like me, not because they have to do it. And the other thing is, if I build rapport very quickly with somebody, then that person thinks they're my friend. And in that situation, psychologically, what happens is a new person am assigned the same rights and privileges as a person that perhaps took years to develop friendship with somebody. So when you develop that rapport, there are several things that take place. They want to help you out, and you're given the same rights and privileges as if we were friends for many years.
So you come in with escalated privileges because of the recommendation.
Yes, pretty much.
That is a great hack.
No, but that's the way it works.
I love
it. Psychologically.
So how did you come about? How did you figure all this out? Was it trial and error? Were you just constantly doing it and then taking notes and saying that worked, that didn't?
Well, I'll tell you another story how it happened. Later in my career, I was asked to train a new agent, and I was a little reluctant to do it, but I did it. And he followed me around with a clipboard, taking notes. Every time I interviewed somebody or every time I did something, he would take notes and ask me a ton of questions. And then at the end of that, he says, wow, I want to know what you know, but I don't want to wait and go through all the pain and suffering you went through to figure it out. Yeah. So by the end of about 6 months or 8 months, I said, let me see that notebook. And I looked at it and I said, wow, you've kind of isolated all the techniques that I use, and then you asked me why. And so I took the notes and I kind of thin sliced all those techniques and was able to identify the variables so that people can use those variables intentionally
Wow.
to learn
That's
the skill.
amazing. If you think about it, that guy wrote a book for you.
Yeah, basically. And Joe Navarro and I sat down and we thought of a lot of little models that we can use to understand humans. And how do you recruit people? How do I recruit somebody to work for me as a spy? How do I recruit a witness? How do I recruit a suspect to talk to me and give me a confession?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of principles that we can use that are outlined in the like switch and the truth detector.
So the like switch, is that the culmination of that young man's work?
Notes.
Well, actually, that young man's work came out. I wrote on advanced interviewing techniques.
Okay. Because I want, because you know what I love is like I have Joe's book here about the dictionary body language, and it sounds like a similar story where he just spent years writing down little notes about things that he would observe and go, okay, that means this, and I saw that, and then it became a book, and I love that because it's like getting a peek into someone's brain of how they think about that. That's a really hard thing to do. Like I'd have to be what that young man was and follow you around and take notes for the next 10 years.
Well, imagine I had talked to Joe on almost a weekly basis when we were working together in the FBI, and it's amazing the conversations we came up with and the ideas and how to develop those ideas. So I think, and Robin too joined our little clique, and so we all kind of were brought up with the same principles and the same values and the same kind of work ethic and trying to give other people the benefit of our learning. Mm-hmm. So especially law enforcement.
So as an FBI agent, how can you stop, or sort of any agent, how can you stop rapport being used against you? What if someone tried to employ the same tactics against you? How do you circumvent those?
Yeah, here's the problem. And the problem is what we've identified are the behaviors that normal people go through when they become friends. Mm-hmm. So it's difficult, and that's why it works, because a con man will use the same techniques that normal people use to be friends, but they're using it for evil purposes, and we're using it for good purposes when we're just out in the normal social world. Yeah. So how do you prevent it? You learn the techniques, and that's why the book serves two purposes. One is the offense. You can learn how to become better socially interact with people, and also on the defense. So I can recognize if you come up to me and use some of these rapport building techniques, I'm thinking in my mind, wait a minute, is that person going to be my friend, or are they going to take advantage of me? So you develop the technique called name it and claim it. So if I see you using a technique, I'm going to name it. Oh, she's using this technique.
Yeah.
Now, is that for good or evil? And if it turns out it's for evil, then I am aware of you using it for evil. So I can monitor your behavior. But if you just want to be my friend, then eventually I won't see any evil intent, and then I'll understand that you want to be my friend.
So when you're going through that process, I love that question, Maxie. So when you're going through that process, so let's say you identified some techniques that we're using. Now, inherently, I would hope you would think that in this case, we're not being evil. But let's say you didn't know. Would you just make an assumption? Would your assumption be on the side of caution, or would you assume the good until it was proven wrong? Like, how do you approach that situation?
Yeah, there's something called the truth bias. Yeah. We believe people until they give us a reason not to believe them. And the reason we do that is because if I had to verify everything you tell me, I would be busy all day verifying facts. Yeah. It's easier to get along in a social environment to say, okay, I believe you. You tell me this, I believe you, until there's a reason for me not to believe.
And that's a healthier way of operating. I would say it sounds like obvious. It would be a healthier way of operating than walking around being suspicious of everybody all the time.
Yeah, but as law enforcement officers, we have deception bias. Yeah. We look at somebody and say they're lying.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unless they show me they're telling the truth.
Yeah. I think that happens in our field where people come up and we tell this story sometimes. When Maxie first approached me through LinkedIn, she came to me asking if I would talk to her about a job. I thought I was being catfished, which, I thought she was like a honey trap from some foreign country that wanted to get at our clients, because I'm like, why would someone who's been in oil and gas and who is a model and who is a actor and who was a stunt driver want to work for me? And I thought, this is fake. This is a trap. So I treated her completely bad. She flew to Florida overnight just to meet me, because I was like, you're not even a real person. I mean,
even when I got there, he was like,
I'm like,
where's
let
Dave?
me pull that mask off. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But I think in our field, we tend to do what you just said, deception bias, where I get approached by someone and automatically I'm thinking, yeah, you're just trying to get at me.
What's the amazing thing about this stuff is it works overseas. It works in all cultures.
Yeah.
Because when I go overseas and we're training people overseas, we train the same techniques, and we actually go out and talk to people live, and they're getting all kinds of information from people through elicitation, because it works across cultures.
So what do you have to take into consideration? Because that's a nice point. When you're dealing with another culture, there must be some considerations you have to take in, that it can't be the same as, just here in America, let's say.
The analogy I like to use is, what I like to give people is a cake. And that's a cake that's baked with human behaviors that all humans share across the world. No matter where you're from or what you're doing, if you're a human, you share a core basic behaviors that all humans experience. But what you have to do then is put the culturally specific frosting on that cake. But we can't teach you all the cultural things. That's what I tell the agents. We can't teach you all the cultural things. You have to figure out what that frosting is and frost the cake. But we can give you the core human behaviors.
I'm writing that down, because I think that's a great. I mean, I actually mistyped. I was writing baking a human cake. That has a different connotation than a human behavior cake, which I like much better. Let's not teach people how to bake a human cake. I think that's a little gross. I don't know. What do you think, Max?
The FBI will come for us.
So. Yeah. My name is Maxie Reynolds. I live in... Sorry. I love that analogy. That's a kind of a cool analogy. So you do have to, the frosting part is figuring out those little cultural differences that are going to make it easier for, like, let's say Maxie was in her home country in Scotland and I didn't know her and I was going to approach her to build rapport with her. I do need to consider what her culture says is good and bad in those kind of interactions.
Start with an insult.
One of the...
No, she said start with an insult.
Scotland, start with an insult.
I know that's so un-American. I don't know if I could do that. I don't know. That would be so hard.
It's the frosting. Continue, Jack.
Okay. I don't have that jar of frosting with me though. So anyway.
Oh, I love it. Yes, that jar of frosting is not in my cabinet.
But what I was going to say is, one of the things in the elicitation repertoire, there's something, there's a basic human need to correct other people. Mm-hmm. And we correct other people because it makes us here and the person we're correcting down here. So that boosts our ego. So in Scotland, if I was to say something false in Scotland, like you're from Edinburgh, right?
How dare you? No, I'm just kidding. Yes, I am.
No, but what did I do though?
No,
I sent a false statement out, which we call a false premise. You could let that go, correcting it.
Yeah.
You couldn't do that because of your human nature and the need to correct. So I'm able to find out where you're from without really asking you where you're from.
Yeah. A deliberate false statement of sorts.
Yes. So you see how it works cross-culturally. It works in any culture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because people have a strong need to correct others because we're all egocentric.
Mm-hmm. So do you personally, as FBI agents, do you have to work to combat that yourselves? Because what if I say, oh, you're a bricklayer, and you go, oh, I'm an FBI agent. That's not good. So how do you stop that?
Well, it's something that we developed called Brian's loop. So when you go out into the world, people don't do this, but when you go out into the world, into the public, or in the case of intelligence, you already have predetermined what information you're going to release to the public. So I'm going to release, and I know what is in my releasable stuff. I've already delineated that. So now if you're eliciting from me, I'm going to answer yes, no, I don't know, and then tell you what I do know, and then I'm going to put it back on you.
Okay.
So if you ask me a question, where do you work? I'll say, I work for, say I'm an undercover agent. I'll say, well, I work for the so-and-so company. And then you'll say, oh, and just release that information I want to release. And then I'll say, oh, you must have a more interesting job than I do.
Okay.
And I'm going to allow you then to talk about you. And you would rather talk about you than talk about me, because that's human nature.
That's interesting. I haven't heard this term Brian's loop before.
Yeah.
That's because I made it up.
Oh. Wonderful.
Perfect.
I was going to ask you, who is Brian? Because that's
Brian's my son.
Oh.
When we worked in training military interrogators, and when we did the final exercise, they would actually have to set up an interrogation camp, and then all the people that were involved were role players, but they actually performed the mock crimes that they were supposed to have committed. So they actually did it. So you can tell the truth. So Brian was supposed to be the head terrorist. He was the guy that was making all the bombs. So they started interviewing him, and he used a lot of the stuff I talked about. And they give him a predetermined set of rules that he can talk about, information he's supposed to give to these people. So he just says, yes, no, I don't know, tells them what they do know, and puts it back on them. And Brian was driving them crazy because they couldn't crack him. And they kept saying he's innocent. He's nothing to do with this, because we introduced red herrings and that kind of thing. So I asked Brian eventually, how do you do that? And he showed me, and I went, oh, okay. So I went to the literature. A lot of literature supports that. They teach it in SEER training, a similar thing in SEER training, and several other survival courses.
I love it.
I started training the role players to do that, and they finally told me, don't. You're driving the students crazy, because they can't break Brian's loop. It's tough to break it.
And that's interesting, because it sounds smarter than just staying silent, like saying, I'm not answering that. I'm not going to answer that, because that automatically leads people to think you're guilty. But by giving them answers, but only giving them the answers that your loop says they're allowed to know, sounds like a great way to just throw a confusion bomb in the mix.
And I can always say, I told you the truth. I answered every question you asked. I told you the truth.
So does Brian's loop allow you to build rapport where I just simply yes and no's wouldn't?
Well, yes or no answers are unusual. People don't answer yes or no. They answer yes plus, no plus, I don't know plus. So what you want to do is put it back onto them in the form of flattery, right? So what you want to do is you want to allow that person to flatter themselves. You don't want to make a direct compliment. So I'm not going to directly compliment you on something. I'm going to allow you to compliment yourself.
Yeah.
So I could say it takes a lot of energy to, be involved in a lot of things like what you say you were a stunt driver, and my gosh, a model, and it takes a lot of determination to do that. And you're thinking to yourself, well, yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
And to be one of the top bloggers in the country, that's certainly an accomplishment.
Yeah, Chris.
I'm not giving you a direct, because if I was to directly compliment you, you would go shields up and think something's wrong. And every day when a student comes into my office and they want something from me, they'll go, Professor Schafer, you're the best professor I've ever had in the whole world. And I go, what do you want?
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's not normal behavior. Now, what they should have said was, Professor Schafer, I'd like your advice on something.
Yeah.
Now, that would do what? Allow me to what?
Yeah. To take that compliment. Yeah, that's
But I'm the professor. And so
Yeah.
I'm flattering myself. That's a lot better way to attack the problem than it is to come in and use that flattery, which causes shields to go up.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. Go ahead, Max. Sorry, I cut you off.
So is the process that you're talking about now, is that more time consuming than if we were able to go to people and say, like, hey, Chris, you're the grandfather of, I said grandfather because he deserved it. You're the grandfather of social engineering.
Godfather.
I would love to work with his grandfather. Would love to work for you. That's a shorter route, because it's essentially, in my mind, will get the same outcome, and you're saying it will not. So
I'm not saying it won't. What I'm saying is
unlikely.
Perhaps if you were to say, you're the best human hacker there is, and you're the best social engineer there is, and he's thinking to himself, and which he did, by the way.
Yeah, I know. But I didn't say
What shields up.
I did. I wait. As soon as she said it, I put myself back in that, and I went, "What do you want? You know, who are you?" And I'm like, "Give me your details."
That.
And then she sent her resume, which is literally utterly ridiculous. It looks fake, and that's how I responded to her. I said, "Next time you try to scam someone, use a more realistic resume." And she answers with, "Oh my, is it wrong? Did I do something wrong? Please tell me how I can fix it." And I went, "Well, that's
successful."
I'm like, that's a different response. I'm like, wait, she didn't get offended. So I'm like, wait, tell me more about this experience and this. And then she started talking about her oil and gas and other things. And I'm like, wait, she may be real. Like, this may not be a fake person, you know?
But if you were to, I'm just saying that the right way is the way that works for you.
Okay.
I'm not here saying this is the right way, this is the wrong way.
Yeah.
That's why we develop so many tools, like in the light switch and the truth detector. All that is a book full of tools. Mm-hmm. Some tools people can use, and some people can't use the same tools because it doesn't fit their personality. So you have to find the tools that work for you and then use those tools. So I'm not saying your approach was wrong. I'm just saying if it worked for you, obviously it did, you're employed. So it worked for you. So that's the right way.
Ouch. Wow. You see that? You see that nonverbal there, Jack? You see that one?
I was
that
thinking,
hurt.
by the skin of my teeth.
That hurt.
So what I'm saying is the right way is the way that works for you. But there are tools that we can use to help you achieve your goal or give you a greater probability of achieving your goal, because nothing's certain in human nature.
Yeah.
You could put some set of circumstances today, put it in the same set of circumstances 2 weeks from now, and the probability is they're going to react the same, but not necessarily, because they're humans. And that's what makes this whole engineering thing difficult to read people.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, because Max and I have talked about that in reference to this story. Is it just so happened that we were needing another person also when she approached. Mm-hmm. But if I was full up on employees and didn't need, even if she had approached perfectly, I still would have been like, well, we're not hiring right now. And I wouldn't have tempted her to fly across the country just to meet to prove she was real. Right. But the fact that we were actively looking for a new employee and she was interested in it, and I just needed to prove that she wasn't fake, then I was like, throw the gauntlet out there. Okay, so if you really want to work, then I need you to come here and we'll interview.
That instance is when skill meets opportunity.
Yeah. But it's interesting.
Allowed her to flatter herself
because you have skill, Maxie.
And the beauty of all this stuff is it's within the human baseline. In other words, humans as a whole have a baseline in which they operate, human behaviors. Mm-hmm. So if you operate inside that baseline, people will not recognize that you're using these techniques. It's only when you do things outside the norm that people pay attention, because our brain is constantly scanning the environment for threats. So what happens is when we judge things to be non-threatening, the brain kind of puts it in a slot and says, I've seen that behavior before, it's not threatening. I'm going to spend that time looking for other threats. So it ignores those things that they've already determined are not threatening. So if we operate in that area, then nobody knows we're doing that.
Can I swing back just for a moment to the truth default mode that we talked about, the truth bias earlier? Because it's a really rich sort of, guess what's the word I'm looking for? Really rich, just concept.
It's rich.
It's just rich. But
concept.
it's fascinating. But
Amazing.
I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Tim Levine. He talks about truth default mode a lot, and it's the same principle you're talking about. But what he said, and I would just be really interested to know if you agree, was that we don't need just one thing to say they're lying to me or they're being dishonest or they are not who they seem. We need a few things to break that default to truth mode. Do you think that that's true, or do you think that more often than not we just need one?
No. What we need is a cluster and clusters, because one nonverbal does not indicate deception.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think, oh, you look up and to the right, they're lying. Well, no research supports that. But you can use it as a baseline. Now, if I ask you questions about your mid-past or mid-history, not distant, but short-term history, and you look up and say, right, every time I ask you the question, then I could say, okay, if I ask her the short-term memory question, she looks up and to the right. That doesn't mean she's lying. But then if I ask you another shortcut, where were you the night the murder occurred, and you don't look up and to the right, you've broken the baseline.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? That means you broke the baseline.
Yeah.
So what we have to do then is discover, why did you break the baseline? And then it could be because you're lying. It could be because you had an itch or you scratched or who knows.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not there's no silver bullet, and it's very difficult, because nonverbals are kind of a secondary response to the fight-flight response. And if you don't have detection apprehension to trigger the fight-flight response, you're not going to get nonverbals to indicate deception. But with verbal techniques, you don't need detection apprehension to get the cues or the clues for detection, for deception, because words are a direct representation of what we're thinking. So if the closest you can get to reading somebody's mind is to listen to the words they say, because that's a direct representation. And so if they're thinking the truth, what they have to do is take that truth, I did it, they have to transform that truth into what? Something that resembles a truthful statement. And that's when you're going to get the differences between truth and deception verbally. And so I believe the verbal cues are more reliable than the nonverbal cues, because verbal cues need detection apprehension. In other words, I have to make you believe that you can't lie to me, and I have to make it so that the consequences are severe enough for you to fear that. But with the verbals, you don't need that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, perfect.
The literature's all over the place with nonverbals, because where do they go? They go to the colleges and they get students, and they say, student number one, lie to me. What's the consequence? Nothing. So you're not going to trigger that fight-flight response. So you have to make it. Now, if I said, if you get caught lying, I want you to lie to me, and if I can pick up that you're lying, and you fail to do that, then you're going to flunk.
1 year in jail.
Well, you're going to flunk. Well, there's a motivation there.
Yeah.
But can the consequences be too severe? So if you were to threaten someone's, say, life, or they were already maybe had their freedoms restricted, and you were saying, tell me, and no matter what they tell you, their circumstances weren't going to change, does that affect how someone might speak?
Yeah. That's why you want somebody to do it out of, because they like you and they want to talk to you, not because they have to talk to you.
So it's sort of a blend of consequences and rapport coming together for you?
Well, the thing here's what I do to my students. What I'll do is they'll say, Mr. Schafer, why can't we just do it like on TV and interview people, slap them around, and they'll confess? Well, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
What I do then, next time that student says something, I'll engineer it so I ask them a question. Then I'll jump on them and say, you're stupid. How did you ever get into college? You don't deserve this. You're stupid. I mean, and they're like, what are you talking about? I said, yeah, you're stupid. That was a stupid question. And I just kind of downgrade them a bit.
Yeah.
And so then I wait about 5 minutes, and I go back and say, I was wondering, could you do me a favor and help me out with this? They look up and say, no. I said, oh, let's stop. This is a learning moment. And you weren't going to help me, were you? No, because you insulted me. I said, what do you think a suspect's going to feel like if you start insulting them?
Mm-hmm.
See, so you can't, there's got to be consequences.
Yeah, that's fun. I always tell people when I get asked that in classes, like, think about how you treat your kids. You know, like parents not going to get willing compliance from your kids if you just insult them and yell at them and degrade them. No. You're going to get willing, loyal compliance if you treat them with respect and dignity and, you know, talk to them like people. Then they're gonna be, you know, I mean, of course, kids mess up with stuff, but they're going to be more obedient and loyal to the family rules if you treat them that way than if you treat them the other way.
And the other trick is get a commitment. If you want somebody to do something for you, you ask them, you say, can I have your commitment that you will do this? And it was funny. I wanted my medical records by 5 o'clock because I was going to see a new doctor. I was switching doctors. And, you know, getting medical records is tough. The girl said, I said, well, I need those medical records by close of business today, 5 o'clock. Well, I'll try, sir. No. Try isn't good enough. I want your commitment that you're going to have this done by 5 o'clock. And she says, okay, I'll commit to that. I said, good, thank you. 2 minutes to 5, I'm getting beeped, and you know, it's back in the day. I'm getting beeped, phone calls from the office. I go, what's the problem? They say, oh, the clerk from the medical office wants to make sure that you know that those records are ready to pick up, and it's before 5 o'clock.
That's great.
So, translate this into your kid. You want your kid to clean their room by the time you come home from work? You say, I'd like you to clean your room, Junior. Okay, Dad. I want your commitment that you will have that room clean by 5 o'clock. I'm counting on you.
What's the psychology behind it, though? Why does that work on humans?
Because when we make a commitment and we articulate a certain stance or point, we tend to live up to what we articulate with. It's called the psychological principle of consistency. We want to live up to what we say we're going to do. So when I'm in an interviewing situation, I always say, I will commit to tell you the truth no matter what during this interview. But I want you to make that same commitment to me. Will you commit, tell me the truth? What's a suspect going to say? No. They have to say yes. So what you're doing is you're setting up a psychological, what I call a rapport trap. You're setting them up to give you the truth. Because when they start lying to me, I just stop and go like, wow, what's wrong? I've lived up to my commitment. I've always told you the truth. You're having a little trouble today with that commitment. What's going on?
Yeah, Cialdini wrote about that, right? Commitment and consistency.
Yeah, that's exactly where I got that from.
Yeah, and it makes our brains feel bad when we don't. Yeah, I like that. I never thought about applying it that way. And actually asking for the commitment. So that's a really great application of that principle from Cialdini.
It's that reciprocity that he also has reciprocity. So if another life hack, you know how you do somebody a favor and they go, thank you. And you go, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No, you say, I know you do the same for me.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
It's a reciprocity.
Yeah. You're setting it up to get paid back.
Yeah, so when I ask them for something, they're going to be predisposed to help me.
Right.
Because the reciprocity.
That is great.
Yes.
Oh, Jack, literally, I'm looking at my clock. I'm like, how did 45 minutes just pass? Because you have so many great tips, man. This is awesome. We always end with two.
You have time, I'll leave you with one more.
Yes, of course. We'd love it.
And that's called the lip purse. You know, I remove and I saw you do it several times. That's why I reminded
Which one,
me.
Maxie or me?
Maxie.
Me,
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
Because
Yeah.
when you, when I'm going through a topic and I see that lip purse, that means you have formed a negative opinion to what I just said. Your mind.
She just did it again. That's great.
That's so untrue. Try again.
Try again.
Try
You're
again.
lip blocking. You can't lip block.
I can on a podcast.
Yeah, this is going to be video.
Right. I've been outsmarted.
So when I want to, with my boss's situation, I wanted to get money to do something, right? And as soon as I say, here's the benefit, here's the downside, here's the upside, here's how much it's going to cost. You see the lip purse? So you want him to change. You just did it again. You just want him to change his mind while it's still in his mind. Because if he says no, then he's articulated no, and that's the principle of consistency.
Yep.
He's not going to want to change his mind because that causes anxiety. So if I see that, then I'm going to automatically say, oh, I bet you're thinking it costs too much. But here's the benefit, and then you try to talk him out of it before he has a chance to do it.
Can that be a self-soothing habit too? Because more often than not, when I'm doing this, I think as I become aware of it, it's habitual. Like I'm chewing at the side of my cheek.
Okay, that might be a baseline behavior then. And that's the other thing with nonverbals is we have to get your baseline.
And I disagree with everyone. Oh, right. Well, it was really good to have you on.
No, I mean, actually what's great is
But nonetheless, you did it at the, whether it's a baseline behavior or not, it was a perfect demonstration of.
Yes, I agree.
Well, lip pursing would be different, right, Jack, than her, like if the lips are twisted, right? Like on the side or something, it would be more like during the conversation. Like
a lip bite means that she wants to say something, but she's afraid to say it. And I see that with my students.
Yeah.
And I say, oh, you've got something to say. And they go, yeah, how did you know? Because and I do that with the lip purse. If I say something, the student purses their lips, I go like, oh, you don't agree with me, do you? How did you know I don't agree with you? Because you told me.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Max is like an open book. It's great.
I know my face gives away everything.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. That's why we enforce video meetings. It's just so
don't be a
great.
liar then. Tell the truth.
So Jack, if we had to, of course, we're going to put the like switch and the truth detector in the show notes, but are there any books, it doesn't have to be on this topic, it could be just something you read recently that you really liked, any books that you would recommend for us?
You know, it's kind of off the beaten track here.
Sure.
Hang with me for a little bit. I like 19th century English literature.
Okay.
Ooh.
And the reason I like it, Dickens, Austen, Hardy, I like the Russian too, the Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. The reason I like them is because back then they didn't have TV, radio, or social media. So those books were thick and they dove deep into human psychology and nature and human behavior. So when I read those books, I pick up a lot of really key points about human behavior. And then when I take those ideas and kind of adapt them to the modern world, like, whoa, what great insights you have. No, I just read a few books. And people don't want to read those books.
So if you had to name the best one that you think people, like let's say no one, so people listening aren't a fan of 19, where should they start?
And I don't know. I mean, I like Emma.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. It's a good book. Okay,
but talk about human behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the way she interacts and she pokes fun at the old lady and
oh no,
kind of breaks.
It does, yeah.
No, but isn't that human nature?
Yeah.
And I learned so much from those books.
That's great.
Because and nowadays all they want is action and light reading, and they don't want to read anything more than 600 words. So
So Jack, who would you consider your mentors? People you look up to.
Mentors. You know, I have an unnamed mentor, my training agent when I was in the, well, actually his name was, Lesko Proctor. Proctor Lesko was his name. And he gave me some really good advice when I was a new agent. And the one thing that always stuck in my mind was grow old and stay bold. And he said, everything you do in your bureau career is for your post-bureau career. So, because we spent 20 years in, and I retired at 51, and I'm not going to quit working. So, I just he was the kind of guy who he would let me do it, and then fail. And he says, "I knew you were going to fail. Well, why didn't you say something? You wouldn't listen to me anyway if I told you." Right. I like my kids. So he knew how to handle new agents. That you got a thing coming out of your backside the size of a Buick, and it's just you're flying all over the place, right? All you need is he was the vector of the blue flame, and he got me going in the right direction.
That's cool.
Very cool.
That's cool. That's nice. That's a nice mentor notice. Thank you for that.
Yeah, 20 years of experience that I really dug into. He had a repertoire of a lot of things, and he'd always look at me and he says, "You're reinventing the wheel. Why don't you ask me? I'll tell you how to get that done quicker." Anyway, Proctor Lesko. I haven't seen him in 20, 30 years, so I don't know.
So Jack, the best way for people to connect with you, is that through your LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or just email me at jackschafer500@yahoo.com.
Okay. And
it's kind of my public access email.
People like to connect with our guests at times, so that would be great. I can't thank you enough. This was an awesome recommendation from Robin and from Joe, so I really appreciate you coming on. It felt like the 45 minutes flew here. So
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If you want to follow Maxie, you can do that on Twitter at
Maxie Reynolds. I think. I don't know. I don't use it. You can follow me on Instagram.
Yes, it's Maxie Reynolds.
I'm really bad at Twitter.
We are really bad at
person.
Marketing. I'm Human Hacker on Twitter, or you can find us on social-engineer.com, social-engineer.org, Human Hacking Conference, Human Hacking Book, or Innocent Lives Foundation.org. Okay, I think that is basically it. Hang with us on our Slack channel. What do we got coming up next time on the Human Element series? I don't know.
I don't know either.
I don't either. So it will be a surprise who we have coming up next. It will be awesome. Anyhow, we appreciate all of you listeners and your feedback, helping us improve this podcast each and every month. Maxie, as always, thank you for your amazing questions and allowing us to use your wonderful face as an experiment in nonverbal exercises, as you do almost every day of my life.
I know.
You are a joy and a ray of sunshine.
You stop being nice to me. You know I'm Scottish and not only like insults.
Well, until next month, everyone, enjoy Clutch.
Bye.
See you.